You have the New Year announcements.
I got the New Year's.
Yep, next week.
All right. Get back here before y'all sit in. No cold? There you go. Hey, sweetie. Come here, I need my hug. Good morning.
We usually send this out here. Bless it. Marshall's over there. That's what we got. Wherever you want.
We had it.
No. One vote. That's right. Over that way. Yeah, I sit there and listen, and then you can sit there and watch. I just sit there so it's easy for me to get up. There it is.
I mean, it's like. Yes, it's not outside. But first down. We get you. Now when you go in.
Huh? All right. We're done with
It was.
I'm jealous, but it's okay.
Good morning. It's good to see everyone this morning. It's the first day of the week. I know we still have some gone, probably out and about, and I'm sure we'll have some more show up. Let me see real quick here. Let me make sure I've got this on, or I can answer everybody's question and everything online. All right, we're going to be in Genesis chapter 28. Genesis chapter 28, continuing through our study. And we're dealing with, of course, Jacob now, as we've gone through Abraham to Isaac to Jacob and Esau, of course. We'll talk a little about him this morning, too. But we're going to start off, of course, like we always do every week, start off with our questions, just give us reminders of where we're at, what we've studied throughout this, and go through it. So we'll go all the way back to lesson 90, which was in Matthew 22, Jesus. The question is, answering the lawyer, what did Jesus say was the great commandment in the law of Moses? That's exactly right. So you have love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and strength, so it says in other verses. But that's exactly right, and it's important to make sure we know that. That is the greatest law. It says the second would be basically treating others, your neighbors, yourself, as we find there. Which brings us now to the next question, all the way to Moses, explaining back to 51, is what did baby Moses' mother do with him to keep him from being killed by the Egyptians? Exodus 2, 3 through 4. Put him in a basket and stuck him in the river. Exactly right. And that's where, of course, Pharaoh's daughter would find him. After Moses killed the Egyptian, why could Pharaoh not find him? He fled to where? Midian. Exactly right. Good job. All right, so the next one. All the way forward to lesson 130. Gets back close to where we're at today. Abraham. When did Isaac first see Rebekah? Genesis 24:63. That's exactly right. When he was meditating in the fields, what it said, she was on the camels that were coming in, And that's the first time we see that happening. Of course, he looks up at Caesar, she covers herself, and then he sees her after that, of course, after she gets off. Yes or no? Did Isaac love his wife Rebekah? Oh yeah, without a doubt. Genesis 24:6-7. It's a great little love story as we see there. Next one, lesson 131 with Isaac again. Now, what were names of Isaac and Rebekah's twins? Esau and Jacob. I didn't hear that. All right. How were the boys different? First of all, Esau was full of red hair. Actually, not just red hair, right? Very, 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 very hairy. He had it everywhere, what it sounds like. And what kind of guy was he? What did he like to do? He was a hunter. He was a land guy. He liked being outside in the land. And what about Jacob? What do we see the difference? What was Jacob like? He would get real close with mama's boy. He was one really that knew how to do things in the home. And we see that very just totally different. It'd be like one was suit, one not. And you see that how that they live. And so which was the older of the two? Esau. Esau came out first, exactly right. He was the first of the two. What was Esau's other name? Anybody know it? Oh, I heard it. Edom, exactly right. We see the Edomites would come through him, and we find that. So go to the next one. Name the occasion when Esau sold his birthright. Genesis 25:29-34. First of all, who did he sell it? Oh, he sold it to Jacob, yeah. So I forgot to have that up there. So when was it? Name the occasion. What happened here? He was hungry, but he said he was what? I'm dying of starvation. I'm starving to death. He goes, well, I'll tell you what. I'll give you some of this stew right here, this red stew in this bowl, if you give me your birthright. And he did it. Like it was no big deal. And that was a bad thing on his part, but we see how that worked out, of course, in God's plan. Next one, 132, Isaac. Describe the feelings of Isaac and Rebekah over Esau's marriage. Remember, who did Esau marry? Not name, but what type of people? Esau married the Canaanites, and we also see him marry another, we're going to see, and it's really, so what did it do to them? Did it make them happy and excited about it? They grieved over it because they were afraid that they were going to pull him away from God, which we know Esau was already in that direction, way away from God, and he continued just moving farther and farther. So in obeying God, what does it mean to be baptized? Become a new Christian. How are we baptized? Immersion in the water. Exactly right. We're immersed in the water. We're buried in it and brought back up. We babes in Christ. Which brings us to 133, the last one here. We see here with Isaac, Genesis 27. Whose idea was it for Jacob to trick Isaac into giving him the blessing? Mom, Rebekah, exactly right. You had that problem there with the two of them. The favoritism that was being played. And remember we see that Isaac was all about Esau, and Rebekah was all about that of Jacob. So next one, what blessing was left to Esau? Was there actually a blessing? There was none to give. His dad said, I have none to give you. Then he told him basically his future of how bad it would be, and the things that how he would have to live fighting off people basically throughout his life. And as a result of his blessing, what did Esau want to do to Jacob as a result of the blessing that was given to Jacob? What did he want to do to him? He wanted to kill him. He was so mad at him, he said, I'm going to kill my brother after I get done grieving my father. And so Rebekah made the decision to do what? Send him away. Now she comes to Isaac and she's going to tell him basically like, hey, I'm afraid of the women here that Jacob's going to marry one of them. So she makes up this. It was probably true, but still was kind of a plan just to get him out of there because she knew that Esau was going to try to kill him. And so that's where we bring us to this morning. As we have here, we're going to be talking about Jacob, the full story, not everything with it. If you remember, we talked about, Abraham. Abraham has about 15 chapters about Abraham, a lot to deal with him. And then Isaac, we basically 1.5 chapters. There's really not much about him at all. And then we have Jacob, has a whole bunch more chapters. So we see Abraham and Jacob are really where everything, goes to. And we see them planning on moving that seed towards that of Jesus Christ that we find. So as we look to this, we're going to see this morning that Jacob is going to Jacob fled home. I just wrote what they said. Now it's not right. That doesn't sound right. Jacob is going to flee to basically, we say his home. We go, wait, I thought his home was where it is, Beersheba. No, we know what he's going to do. He's going to move over to where his family was from, basically, all the family. And that's what we see there in Genesis 28. So let's go ahead and begin here. We're going to say a few things before we get into that. Genesis 28, 1 through 5, we're going to see Jacob's departure. But Genesis 28 stands out, I guess you'd say, really is one of the most pivotal chapters in Jacob's life, as we see in basically unfolding of the covenant of the history of Israel, of what was taking place. And remember, Jacob is no longer, we see, inside the safety of his father. His father, Isaac, basically meaning in his tent, living in that area where he would be taken care of, nothing would ever happen to him. And we know now he's a fugitive, and really the best way to look at it, fugitive leaving home under the weight of family conflict, personal failure, and divine purpose. Remember, God has a plan for all this. We see this going through. Though he departs in fear and in uncertainty of what's going to take place here, God meets up with Jacob. He's actually going to take the position of where his father should have been with God. But here we see Jacob is going to be this man that is going to meet up with God. And God's going to show his grace to him and the importance behind it. And so what this chapter reveals is that God is faithful. He is faithful to his covenant. He's faithful to present, to be present basically with his people, even when they are on the run. I want you to catch this. And committed, transforming flawed individuals into covenant individuals, as we see here. Remember, we find and we realize that Jacob, of course, is one of the covenant, the heirs to that covenant, just like we see dealing with you and I, as we see when you move forward into the New Testament. But we need to understand, Jacob was not a man who was ready yet to lead people. He was not a man yet ready to lead people as God would have him do. So what God's going to do, God's going to mold him. This is the beginning of it, where he's going to mold Jacob. And he's going to, basically, Jacob is going to have to learn things through patience. I mean, patience. We know when we get to Wednesday night where we see Jacob marrying, of course, Rachel and Leah, when we see the two of them and all of that taking place there, and he had to learn a lot. And we see that he basically is tricked the same way he did with his father and his brother, and he understands the difficulty behind that. So Genesis 28 is kind of pretty much going to teach us about God's sovereignty, his divine presence, his worship, the promise that is given to us through Christ, that we see this here. And Jacob is going to leave this area and go to what's called Paddan Aram, is where he's going to be at. And that's the northern area of Mesopotamia, we would say. And he's going to reach his destination. But before he gets there, he's going to, we see that we all probably know these verses dealing with what we call heaven's ladder. The ladder going from heaven to earth, as we see angels ascending, descending upon it. And it's going to basically tell us some things here, and something that we haven't seen before. We saw Abraham talking with Jesus, of course, when we say Jesus pre-incarnate, in the burning bush. We see that without a doubt, and as it says, the angel of the Lord, definite article being Christ. But we see that happening, and now we're going to finally see where Jacob's going to get that opportunity and that chance to see that. So let's start here with this obedience mixed with consequences as we deal here with Jacob, Genesis chapter 28, 1 through 5. And if we go ahead and so we'll read that for us, please.
And Isaac called Jacob and blessed him, and charged him, and said to him, You shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. Arise and go to Padan, to the house of Bethel, and your mother's father, and take yourself a wife from there of the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. May God Almighty bless you, and make you fruitful, and multiply you, that you may be an cesspool of people, and give you the blessings of Abraham, to you and your descendants with you, that you may inherit the land in which you are a stranger, which God gave to Abraham. So Isaac sent Jacob away, and he went to Padan to Laban, and the son of Bethuel, and Cedartown, and the brother of Rebekah, the mother of Jacob and Esau.
Thank you. So as we look at this, we begin pretty easy. Isaac sends Jacob away. As we know and understand, verse 28:1, just remind us again where it says, Isaac called Jacob, blessed him, and charged him, and said to him, You shall not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. He says, I don't want you to be here. You need to go on. Your mom's concerned about this. I'm concerned about it. And as we move forward with this. So Jacob's departure is not merely an escape from Esau's anger. It's really also an act of obedience. Remember, Rebekah actually believes what when she sends him away? That he'll be back. It won't be, she said it'd be for a few days, is what she actually said. It wouldn't be long. And we know actually after she sends him, it shows how terrible the favoritism was in there and how that sin can get in the way. That actually, when does she see him again? Never again. This is it. She'll never see him again. And this is the consequences of certain things happening, not obeying God in the way they should. So this is why it's so important we see this, the act of obedience that we're going to find through Jacob, that he's going to listen to his father, not going to argue about it, he's going to go ahead and go. So Isaac blesses Jacob again, confirming that the covenant blessing stands, despite Jacob's earlier deception that we see taking place here. And the repetition of the blessings emphasizes basically God's irreversible choice. You know, it's just going to continue to move forward through each family member as it moves, as we see it move forward, the patriarch, we would say, of that family. So as we look at this, we also understand the covenant, as we just said, is going to be reaffirmed. Verse 3, notice there once again, Greg, can you read that again, verse 3?
Yeah. May God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, that you may be an assembly of people.
Thank you. So here we find what's going to happen here is here Isaac, basically he evokes what we would call El Shaddai, you know, God Almighty is that word there that we find in the Hebrew, and understanding that the same name God used when speaking to Abraham. They use the same word, Genesis 17:1. So Isaac is explicitly, right here in this moment, passing on the torch. He's passing the torch on to, we see the Abrahamic covenant as we move forward, of course, to that of Isaac. You see that of faithfulness, Genesis 17. We see that of the nationhood promise that's there found in the land promise. And we see all these things coming back to that of where he needs to be a part of that and realize it. Even though he's going to go away for a while, he's not going to, really, lead people or anything like that. But he's learning, and as his whole time while he's there in Cedartown, while he's there in Haran, is really where he'll be at. He has this in his mind that I'm going to be the patriarch. I'm the one that needs to bring all this forward. But he doesn't really see it yet. So what it does, but it confirms that Jacob is the chosen heir and not Esau. That's the whole important point here, is that Esau, being the older brother, remember, said the younger would serve the older would serve the younger, and we see that happening through that. So as we go to that, we find Jacob now, of course, he's moving on, walking up the road, goes to Cedartown. It's about 450 miles. We'll see from where he's at. I'll show you on the map in a little bit. So 28:5 says, so Isaac sent Jacob away and went to Cedartown. Cedartown is located basically in the upper Mesopotamia area, northern area. This is where you see it at. We see Haran's over here, and he's way down here. Remember, way down here. And we see that happen. I'll show you a drawn map that I have here. There's Beersheba, where they're at, living. We all recognize Bethel. Bethel will be very important because we're going to see this on this trip while he's going through this. It used to be called the name of Luz, was the name of this town. And so, but now it's going to be, not yet, but it's going to be referred to Bethel as God is going to give Jacob that name that he will call it. And you'll see what it means there. So he moves on the way up to Damascus, and you see it's like I said, it's about a 450-mile trip all the way up here to Haran. And so it's not a quick trip. It's not like you get on an airplane or you get in a car or truck, move on the way up there. How is he traveling more than likely? By foot, the way it sounds. That's what he's walking. And because really, we're going to learn in a minute, it doesn't sound like he has anything. This is very interesting for this family. Because it seemed like when this family traveled, they traveled with what? They traveled with a lot. You think about Abraham, how much he had when he traveled. You think about Isaac here. And Isaac, remember, was a man that moved from city to city. He was just kind of one that did that, and a sojourner, best way to look at it. And so here, they're used to having something, but here this is going to be different. Because Jacob, we understand, Isaac hasn't, completely died as Jacob leaves. So he's still the patriarch of the family, and he doesn't take anything. And we see this happening. So as we look at this homeland, this is, remember, where Rebekah's family's from, her family. That's where we see and understand that Jacob is sent there to preserve the covenant line through a godly marriage. That's what this is all about. Bill, go ahead.
Well, we know 450 miles by flight's about an hour, by car's about 7 hours, but by foot, how can you calculate it? It's got to be, I think we agree that you can walk, 20 miles a day. I don't know, and I don't even know if they were doing that. But it was a real journey.
It was. And and out here, remember, this isn't like it's in an area that's nice and cool, you've got trees covering you or anything like that. You're in the desert. It's a tough way to go through. More than likely, this took months and months and months as you see to travel up there. It goes by really fast for us, of course, because of what we've given in the Bible about it. So as we look at this here, they're going to have him go here for this godly marriage, just as Abraham, remember, had sent his servant to find a wife for Isaac. As we see Rebekah, of course, he sent him all the way up there to find her, and that's what he wanted. And so instead of this time, them sending a servant to go do it, they're going to send Jacob. And like we said, he's going to be gone forever. Which now brings Genesis 28, 6 through 9. Here we just have a quick glimpse real fast about Esau. we see the direction that Jacob is going to be married off in a godly way, and where Esau is being married, and the Canaanite family, basically most of the Canaanites were those who were, worshipers of all different kinds of things, just wild things out there and so on, and really didn't have a lot of morals when it comes down to it. So let's go and read Genesis 28, 6 through 9, as we see this about him. Someone read that, please.
Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him away to Padan Aram to take himself a wife from there, and that as he blessed him, he gave him a charge, saying, "You shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan," and that Jacob had obeyed his father and his mother and had gone to Padan Aram. Also Esau saw that the daughters of Canaan did not please his father Isaac, so Esau went to Ishmael and took Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nebajoth, to be his wife in addition to the wives he had.
Thank you. So we know that Esau already had wives. He had wives from Canaan. And so he's thinking, okay, I'm grieving my parents and making them upset, especially making my dad upset, because remember, he loved his dad, seems like more than he did his mom. So he's like, well, I'm going to go ahead, maybe this will make my dad happy, I'll go to Ishmael. And remember, Ishmael, we're told that more than likely that the Muslim society came out of Ishmael, when you look at the history of it. And he basically went there and picked a wife. And we see this as we find this understanding, thinking this would make things better. But it doesn't. It just makes Esau worse. I mean, he gets worse and worse as we see through time, the little bit we read about him in the history that is found there. So that's what kind of where it leads off, and where it leaves there with Esau. And now we move into Jacob. We will see Esau later. Esau comes to his mind, and understands, and him and his brother meet up. Just an amazing meeting, as we'll see as we get farther down the road in these chapters. But here we're going to move on to this lonely journey. I mean, it's lonely. We don't read of anybody being with Jacob. And, it's a lonely journey. More than likely, this is kind of what confused me a little bit, because Rebecca, if she's thinking he's going to come back, you think you would have sent him, with an entourage, I guess the best way to put it, of people with him. Isaac, more than likely, I believe Isaac knows once he leaves, he's what? He's gone. He's not coming back. And that's why he doesn't leave here, as we see moving in this direction of what we find. So let's go and read verses 10 through 11 as he's leaving Beersheba.
Now Jacob went out from Beersheba and went toward Haran. So he came to a certain place and stayed there all night, because the sun had set. And he took one of the stones of that place and put it at his head, and he lay down in that place to sleep.
Thank you. So as we said, he leaves Beersheba, no servants, no possessions, no visible protection. And Isaac had to have enough faith in who to take care of him? In God. He had to have. I mean, even though we saw Isaac's faith waver time and time again, and the things that he did, but still he had to have enough faith that his son was going to be taken care of. So the heir of the covenant, here's what's interesting. The heir of the covenant is sleeping out in the middle of the wilderness, the desert we would say, with what is his pillow? A rock. I mean, I know I'm sure there's a lot of you that have leaned up before against a rock. If you're hiking or whatever, whatever you may be doing, maybe you're working outside, you lay down and you think, looks like a really comfortable rock, and I'm going to lay my head on that. And we don't do that. I know when I was about 12 years old, I said before, riding horses and everything, and taking a trip up the mountains, 3 days there, 3 days back. And we used our saddles. Just like in the movie, we had a throw thing we threw down, pulled it over us to sleep, and we had our saddle for a pillow. In the movies they make it like, oh wow, that's great, you're comfortable with that. That is not comfortable at all. I'm going to tell you right now whatsoever. So you can imagine now, sleeping on a rock. Imagine the crick in your neck after you wake up doing that. So here's this man, and this is what I think about this was so cool, is we look at that and we go, what does that have to do with? Notice he's only using, and he only has, what God has really given us. He's given him in that position of that time. So this moment highlights Jacob's vulnerability. We've got to see that. It's the vulnerability that we see in him, that he's going through these changes that are going to take. If anybody's going to learn humility, who's going to learn it now? Jacob, without a doubt. He's going to learn this and see what happens here as we look at this. So Jacob does not even know the name of the place yet, where he's at. He doesn't know it's Luz. Doesn't realize he's just traveling. And you wonder back then, you think, did they have maps? They probably did. They probably had drawings and things, ways to go and so on. Or he may have told his dad, just go north. Just go north. You'll hit a town each time, and just tell me you want to get to Haran. You'll find your way there. We don't know, but we do know that he got there. From a human perspective, this is an ordinary night, just regular ordinary night, ordinary place. But for God's perspective, this area of Bethel where he's stopping now is a sacred ground, as we'll find here. So let's go and look at this where heaven opens, really the best way to look at it. Genesis 28, 12 through 15. And if someone go ahead and read that for us, please.
Then he dreamed, and behold, a ladder was set up on the earth, and its top reached to heaven. And there the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and your descendants. Also your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread abroad to the west and to the east, to the north and in the south. And in you and in your seed all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you.
Thank you. So as it's going to begin with this ladder, let's go and talk about this ladder between heaven and earth for just a moment. We know verse 12 makes it very clear. It says, he's dreaming, and I'm sure all of us here are dreaming things that we can't explain, things that are out there. You wake up and you start to do what? Okay, why did that happen like that? Why did I have a fly on my ear the whole time? In that dream, what was going on? Just little things, anything. Someone's like, that's weird, Ernie. I didn't dream that, just came to my thought. So, we think this and we realize this. And so here's this dream. But this dream is like the dreams we read about in the Bible. It's more like a vision of what's happening here, what's taking place. So the ladder, or another way of stairway, depending on the version you read when he looks at it, symbolizes basically access between heaven and earth. Between heaven and earth. Very important. Notice that it came down from heaven. We see this. And this is not Jacob climbing up to God, as some try to say, but God is graciously opening the way to heaven to all humans. That's what this is about here. That this is where it's going to start with this man moving forward to that great seed found in Jesus Christ. So the angels ascending and descending indicate a divine activity. Also indicate if they're there checking on you, there's protection that is there within this moment. And then there's communication. So you have all these things taking place here in this moment with Jacob that, remember, he has never experienced anything like this. Nothing like this at all. This is all new to him. And we see some great things happening in these verses. In fact, when you go to little areas like Psalm 103, verse 20, you think about here about the angels, the protection is found in it, as the Bible talks about. Someone read that for us, please.
Bless the Lord, you his angels, mighty in strength, who perform his word, obeying the voice of his word.
Thank you. So mighty in strength, he talks about his angels. Very mighty. We see that all throughout the Bible, describing them in certain areas. We also find this in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 14. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 14. Someone go and read that for us, please.
Are they not all ministering spirits sent forth to minister for those who will inherit salvation?
Here he's talking about messengers. Messengers is that representative understanding of angels, is what he's speaking about here, of what we see. So what's interesting about this whole aspect of what's happening with Jacob in this ladder, guess what happens in the New Testament when we get to John chapter 1? Jesus identifies himself as the fulfillment of this vision that is happening with Jacob. In fact, let's go ahead and read that. John 1:51, if someone read that, please.
And he said to him, most assuredly, I say to you, hereafter you shall see heaven open, and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man.
Thank you. So who does this say here is the ladder? So who's the ladder? The Son of Man, we know every reference here of Jesus. So think about this for a moment. Christ is the true ladder, the mediator between God and all human beings. And we see that, everything comes through Christ. We can't get to God without Jesus. The Bible's clear about that. And we see Jesus involved in everything we're a part of. And I love when you think about that, the protection, that communication, the things that are happening there. The watchfulness that is found in it. A lot of times people are like, I don't want God watching me. Yes, you do. Without a doubt, if you really understood and knew that. And we see the importance behind it. So, Jacob, this dream has got to make him feel safe, feel protected, but also probably a little bit confused, but not completely, because of what God says in the vision that we're going to look at in just a moment. Think about 1 Timothy. 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 5. Someone read that for us, please.
For there is only one God and one mediator who can reconcile God and humanity, the man Christ Jesus.
Did you notice that? The only mediator that can reconcile things between us and the Father in heaven is through who? Christ. It's through Jesus Christ that we see this here. So then, of course, we see also the Lord above the ladder. So here he's above the ladder, and we find Genesis 28:13. I just want you to notice it says, behold, the Lord stood above it. And so we look at this. If Jesus is the ladder, well, the Lord here is giving reference to who? If he's above it, God the Father, that we would see and understand. So God personally speaks. This is so important. Personally speaks through this vision, this dream to Jacob, identifying himself as the Lord, meaning Yahweh, as they would understand, the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac. And all this is for one reason. And this is to show, guess what? Your father confirmed the covenant with you, but the covenant isn't completely confirmed until who does it? God. And that's what we see him do in this moment. For the promise is repeated of what's happening here. God reiterates the Abrahamic promise, as we know and understand. The first one is the land promise that we see there. The land which will, lie, I will give to you and your descendants without a doubt. Then he gives them the seed promise, verse 14. Also all your descendants shall be the dust of the earth. And then the blessing of all the nations. That nation promise we would find that in you and your seed all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Brethren, this is so important to understand when we see this. Ultimately, when it all comes about, is that ultimately all this promise points all to who? To Jesus. All to Jesus Christ. In fact, the book of Galatians, chapter 3, verse 16, shows us that. If someone go and read that for us, please.
Now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. He does not say, and to seeds as of many, but as of one, and to your seed, who is Christ.
I mean, that can't get any clearer, can it? I mean, it mentions Abraham here. It mentions promises here. And he said it's not seeds. In other words, there's not going to be a bunch of different ways to get to God the Father. He said there is a seed, one, singular. And we see who is Christ. So as we look at this and understand that, the importance behind it, well, then we also find that God's personal assurance is going to be given to him. Once again, verse 15, behold, I am with you. And notice, I will keep you wherever you go. Now, think about that for a moment. Here, he's not far. He's not too far from Beersheba. And we're figuring maybe, because 8 miles to Jerusalem, and there's 6. So you're probably talking about 104 miles or so, 105 miles from that area. So he's been traveling for some time, without a doubt. But he's only a quarter of the way there, really, when you look at it. And so as we look at this here, God is going to say, I'm going to take care of you. Because you get farther going up through there, it gets a little sketchy. And some of those areas of those roads that they would travel and go through. And he needed to know this. So this is the first time, this is what's interesting. This is the first time that God ever directly speaks to Jacob. The first time that we see this happening. Because God usually always spoke with the patriarch. So here's something else interesting. Isaac, we think about Isaac, we go, oh wow, is Isaac already dead? Has he died? What's going on here? We see this, because he is no longer the one carrying the seed promise. It is now through that of Jacob as we see this happening. But what he does, he promises him his presence, his protection, and his faithfulness. That usually comes from us. We want to promise God how faithful we want to be to him and to Christ. But here, God's saying, look, I'm going to provide for you. I'm going to be in your presence. I'm going to protect you, and I'm going to be faithful to you. That's huge. And God says the same thing for us. We know 1 John chapter 1, 7 through 9, we see verse where he talks about, if we ask God to forgive us, he is faithful to do what? To do so. That faithfulness that is found there. So the assurance echoes through the Scripture, all throughout the Scripture. Joshua 1, verse 5. Here Joshua, remember, is taking over from Moses, leading the people into the promised land. And this being written for us reflects to us, too, that this also speaks to us, and we'll see in Hebrews in just a second. So we're going to read Joshua 1, verse 5, please.
No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you nor forsake you.
Thank you. So Joshua 1:5, very clear as we see this happening, that God makes it very clear and says, I'm not going to leave you nor forsake you. I will never do that. And but of course Joshua's going to be dealing with a lot of people. He's a great general, fighter, armies. We see here leading the people is what he went from to being the man like Moses. And God said basically when he says no one will be able to stand before you, meaning everyone that will come against you to try to fight you, to try to hurt you, try to disturb you, you're going to get through them. If you stay obedient to my will. Bill, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say that, God's promise to Moses as well as to Jacob was not a license to be reckless with your life. That was implied in that promise, you will be a faithful, obedient servant of mine. So there were mutual, really, promises made, but Jacob understood, I have a duty and responsibility, and God said, I'm gonna take care of you, not go out there and be reckless and do whatever you want to do.
That's exactly right. And that works the same with us today, doesn't it? The
Yep.
same thing as we see and understand. In fact, that's why we can read verses like this all the way in the New Testament. In Hebrews 13:5, I'll read this one where it says, let your conduct be without covetousness, but content. Notice, be content with such things as you have. Think about that for he himself has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Now we look at this, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I know as we think about this, that, people think, well, it seems like God forsook Jesus on the cross. No, he didn't. Even though we read there where he says, my God, why hast thou forsaken me from the cross, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. It's not that he forsook him at all, but what he was wanting to do, remember everybody, he was wanting to go to Psalm 22. Psalm 22, that's how it's first registered. It says, my God, why hast thou forsaken me, is the beginning of the title. They didn't have verses, chapters back then, and that's how they would know to go somewhere. And it tells that Psalm 22 speaks so specifically the details of exactly what happened at the cross that we see there. And see, what I want to understand is God the Father has always said, if you obey him, you follow him, you look to him, he's never going to forsake you. God will never leave us regardless, even when we do things wrong, because he's always waiting for us to come back to him. And how great that is. So with all this happening, we get to this place called Bethel, the house of God, is what would be known as Genesis 28, 16 through 19. If someone going to read that for us, please.
Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. Then Jacob rose early in the morning and took the stone that he had put in his head, set it up as a pillar, and poured oil on top of it. And he called the name of the place Bethel, but the name of that city had been Luz previously.
Thank you. So as we look at this area here, as we find this, I love how Jacob used the word that I love all the time. Awesome. He's just like, how awesome is this place? As we see here, of course we know verse 16 is showing that as we described that Jacob realizes that God, let me say this, Jacob is waking in God's presence. The best way to look at it is surely the Lord's place. I did not know it. Jacob realizes that God is not confined. This is so important. He is not confined to sacred locations. That he's only here or only there. God goes where we are. God is everywhere. And he travels, we see here. God meets with people wherever they're at. The moment marks the beginning. Here is the beginning. This moment, what it does, it marks the beginning of Jacob's spiritual awakening. That's what happens here. We'll go to Bill first and then Dad. Go ahead, Bill.
Already, these studies and these lessons provoke questions in my mind that I could have looked up on the internet, but you shall be my internet for the next question. I know somebody claims to have that stone, don't they?
Well, actually, the stone where it's at, the one he slept on, you mean?
Yeah, right.
Because he sets it up here as a pillow. And supposedly, some say they found it, some others say it was stolen over time, and that exactly right. That's the answer you get off the internet. And so, we don't know, but we do know, without that, there is an area there with a little pillar and a stone, like a nice round, kind of smooth stone that sits there. And some say it's there, and some say it's not because the way things went through wars and everything destroyed, and a lot of times over time. Because remember, there were a lot of fights here. Remember when Joshua and them came through? Ai, all the fights that take place here. But great question as we look at that. So the fear of the Lord. Think about this. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Just going to say, it's interesting that in the King James Version, instead of awesome, it uses the word dreadful.
Yep, it sure does.
Surprising.
Well, do you know when we talk about it? Want to say something about that?
Yeah.
Dreadful. Okay, dreadful there, when you look at it, it actually means dreadful in the King James Version. When you look at that time, the Hebrew, it means awedness. Like not dreadful like, oh, I'm scared to death, I got to get out of here. Or dreadful like, this is just not something to be around. I don't want to be here. And it's weird the way they use words, the different from us today, the way it's translated. If you talk back in those King James days, I guess you'd say, dreadful would be a word that you'd be like, oh, this is just a place of amazingness, And it's kind of weird, but that's what it does. So it is, but it is the same meaning of allness. And I've got that right here, actually, in here, as we'll see here, that the fear of the Lord, Genesis 28, verse 17, where it says, awesome. This is all about a reverent fear. And that's what I mean. When he says awesome, it's like I said, God is just awesome. You know, it's a reverent fear for him, knowing there's nothing like God. And so, as we see, it's not a terror, but all Bethel becomes basically a sacred marker in Jacob's life. It becomes a sacred marker for the rest of his life, actually, of what we see here. So Bethel's name, we find its name here. He called this place Bethel. Bethel means, when you look at it, it actually means house of God. And that's what he called it. And the reason he called it the house of God was why? Because of his what? His vision. That he saw the heaven open. You know, we see here this ladder coming down from heaven. And his place transformed by divine encounter, basically, taking place between him and God. It's the same thing with Moses. You know, when Moses goes up on the mountain, he walks up there in this burning bush. And what does God tell Moses to do? What was Jesus? What does he tell him to do? Take your sandals off. Why? This is holy ground. Now, was it that mountain that was holy? What made it holy? It was the presence of God. And that's what we see here, the same thing in this moment with Bethel of what's taking place here. So we find here now, we see Jacob's, but I'll give you an idea where it's at. Here's Bethel. So here's Bethel. There's Ai. So you got an idea. Remember when we studied about Joshua and then when they crossed over the river and this area here, the fighting, you probably recognize the name Ramah, Gibeon, we recognize this. Now here's what's interesting. See this right here? Mount of Olives. What is just to the side of Mount of Olives usually? What can you see from Mount of Olives? You see Jerusalem. Well, see, notice Jerusalem's not here yet. It's called Jebus. And we find this here. And so, as we see, that will become Jerusalem. So it gives you an idea of the distance of what is there. Here's another easier way to look at it today. What we would see, Bethlehem, Jerusalem, Bethel. And we want to, of course, a lot of these names have also, some of them changed over time. So as we look at this, we find ourselves, I got 1 minute, great. Jacob's response, we know, is worship and commitment. Basically, is what happens here. I'll go and read this. Then Jacob made a vow saying, if God will be with me, notice, and keep me in this way, that I am going, and give me bread to eat, clothing to put on, and so that I can come back to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And the stone which I have set as a pillar shall be God's house, and of that you give me, I will surely give a tenth to you. Now this is interesting here. Jacob erects this pillar, pours oil upon it, an act of worship and consecration, and he makes a vow. Now when we look at this, it sounds more like a bargain. You know, like he's bartering with God. You know, if God will do this for me, if he'll do this for me, if he'll do this for me, if he'll do this for me, I will be his servant. You know, it's like today, you hear all the time, you know, someone's in a bad situation or like whatever, and they pray to God, and they say, God, if you just get me out of this, I'll do what? I'll follow and submit to you and do everything you want me to do. Then they get through it and they go, no, God, I'm not really ready for that yet. You know, that's not what this is, see, brethren. He's making a vow is what it is. It's a response to the grace that is found in God. The Lord shall be his God. The place shall remain God's house. He will give a tenth back to God is what he says. And for that to be said at the end there tells us a lot. You know, though Jacob's faith is still developing at this point, this vow shows a turning point. Here is a turning point in this man's life. And God is shaping him from being a deceiver of people of his own family, into what we would know as Israel, the Prince of God, or the Prince with God, as we would see in those moments, Genesis 32:28. And that's it. That we got to the end of it. There's a chapter. I have a few things for us, lessons today. We don't need to go over all those because of time. But appreciate it. Next week we'll look at, as we said, Jacob marrying Leah and Rachel, and we see that taking place. So, any comments, questions before we close? Nope. All right, we'll end there. Thank you. Appreciate your time.